Ian Trottier here for Discussions of Truth. We are in San Marcos, outside of San Diego. I have first-time guest on the show. This gentleman is fascinating, folks, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Bill Lionberger as saying you are a founder of...
I'm one of the original frontline doctors. Yeah, I'm not a founder-owner, but I'm one of the original guys.
So tell listeners about that. What was that journey like to get you to that point to speak on the steps of was the Supreme Court?
Steps of the Supreme Court. So in the very beginning of the pandemic, those of us that had active life practices, in my field, in my world, we're trying to figure out, well, what do we do to combat this thing? This new virus that we're hearing about that now just all of a sudden showed up and became a pandemic. What do we got? What do we have to deal with here? So, as a doctor of chiropractic physician, our wheelhouse is nutrition, immune support, immune systems. So we're like, we can deal with this, right? So we pumped up our program, our protocols, and actually out of the year and a half, we've never lost a patient. We've never had a patient actually come down with active COVID to put them in the hospital. We've kept everybody out of the hospital to our credit, but also to the doctors that I work with through not only FLDS, but all the other doctors that have joined and gotten on the bandwagon of basically keeping people out of the hospital, which means early treatment in all different kinds of ways. So I began to look around and reach out to my medical counterparts, and I said, well, who knows how to treat this on the medical side? And every doc I came to, they said, well, we're being told to do nothing. I go, where in history have you been told to do nothing? You guys can, you can use medicines from other treatments, you can figure other things out. No, we're being told to do nothing and we're not doing anything. I'm like, that's not going to work. And I read the story of Simone, basically being fired because she wanted to treat using other protocols. And so I reached out to her, and she reached back to me, and we made a collaboration, and she invited me to join AFLDS and began to invite me to the events, and basically, I became a frontline doctor. And it was born out of that in the very beginning of trying to find solutions to the problem, speak out about solutions to the problem, and go against basically the legacy media narrative that was out there. And so that's how we cut our teeth in the very beginning on this problem. And along the way, we've learned a lot. In the beginning, it was, pieces, parts. But it's like assembling a huge puzzle. We just had a big puzzle piece drop. So we got the 55,000 pages, right? It was just dropped on Pfizer. So the Pfizer piece just dropped, where we're going through 55,000 pages of their documentation that talks about the adverse events that they knew about from the very beginning, things like that. So
has Pfizer been removed from the stock market? That's a buzz I heard today. I'm
hearing the buzz. I don't know the answer to that yet. I mean, we're literally trying to dissect 55,000 pages. That's a bunch of work. But even within that, we already have damning data, things that we've already known that we pieced together. We're looking at the VAERS databases and its counterparts around the world that show the adverse events, that show the death tolls. Right now, I think the death toll on the VAERS in the U.S. is 24,000, and that's typically considered to be 1% of the number. Now we know it to be actually 1/2 of 1% because they've gamed the system against in every possible way to try to diminish the numbers, including basically if you get vaccinated today, if you have an adverse event for the next 14 days, they call it COVID-related, not vaccine-related, okay? So every possible way they can diminish that number. So we know the number is less, but you can't hide it anymore. Now that we have these information drops that begin to back up, validate, verify what we've been doing all around the world and looking at these graphs, now we know, it's out of the bag. You can't hide it anymore. So, that's what we've got to continue to disseminate and put out there.
Now, Simone, of course, I think caught a lot of momentum because she's identified not only as a doctor, but also a Juris Doctor, right? So she's also a legal advice. Who are some of the legal minds that you've worked with, Bill, that have helped move this forward?
So the top attorneys that are involved in the biggest lawsuit against the Department of Defense, the DOD, I work with, that would be Todd Callender. Todd Callender also works with RENS. He's got the big lawsuits going as well. They collaborate. And Todd actually connects us up with teams of attorneys and law firms around the country and in our areas so that depending on the kind of case that you have, we have a resource. So if you've come to me and you say, look, Dr. Bill, I saw you on a podcast and I learned about you a bit, and we just had a family member that was killed, right? And we want retribution. What do we do? And so we can help refer them into those different resources. destinations. So we kind of work as like a resource hub, if you will, for law firms. So
And we being what?
Well, we meaning my group of people, my team, because I have a team of people that work with me. I have nurses that work with me to do the jailbreaks out of the hospitals. I have attorneys that I also work with, law firms there. And depending on the level of the challenge that we've got is who we bring in to help. Even judges. So I consult with judges from the law side, and from being a law enforcement officer, I've got connections there. So.
And Bill, somebody listening to this right now, what is that internet destination, or what is that that hub for them to get involved with your group?
So our group is actually a segue. It's Guardians of Humanity's Children. It is literally the hub for all of that. Its primary mission is to protect our children, protect our children's genome. But you can reach us at that destination, guardiansofhumanitieschildren.org, and that's how you find us and find all these other resources that we're tied into.
Now you're using strong language, whereas you're saying jailbreak, and so what you're talking about is exactly what you're talking about. A COVID patient, perhaps,
right.
It's been put into a hospital for care. Explain what's going on there in your view. So you're having to go in and extract and save this person's life.
So in one of my main lectures, I talk you through this pathway. We call it the COVID pathway. In actuality, it's a financial pathway in the hospitals. So the hospitals have been incentivized, not only from a coding standpoint, but from a financial standpoint. Every step of the way, they make a certain amount of money. Each person to that hospital, as they pass along this pathway, is worth between $100,000 and $160,000. Okay, and that's before you begin to count the organ harvesting on the back end. Okay, so that's a big number. There's a huge incentive for the hospital to put everybody on that pathway. So when you come in, you can't even go in the hospital now without getting a COVID test. It's free to the hospital, but that they make money on every one. And can we trust a COVID test? The answer is no. The RT-PCR test has been gamed also. It was used as the very beginning, from the very beginning, to say a thing is a thing, and to own what's called the full proprietary of something, which means we own all of it to say a thing is a thing. Nowhere else in time have we actually used a thing like this to say a thing is a thing, whether you have symptoms or not. Okay? So they basically have owned the stats, the numbers, and when you come in, you take one of these tests that's not accurate. It can be as much as 98% not accurate. Then they start you on that pathway. I had an officer recently go into the hospital. He was having respiratory problems from the
police officer.
Yeah, from the flu. One of the officers I'm associated with.
And listeners, I don't think you've mentioned this, but you are a police officer yourself.
I am an active duty police officer. Yeah.
Outside of being a doctor of chiropractic,
correct.
You're also an active police officer.
Correct. So he goes into the hospital, he wants to get checked out, right? They give him a COVID test, say, oh, you just popped positive. He goes, okay, well, I'm just having a little bit of distress, I just want you to check me over. They began to groom him from the very minute he walked in to say, well, you're going to go into the COVID ward today, and we expect that you'll be on a respirator in approximately 48 hours, depending on how you respond to treatment. He goes, I just walked in. He goes, how could I possibly end up on a ventilator? I just walked in. And they said, well, that's the way it goes, because we're going to put you on treatment because you have COVID. You have to go into this. You have to go into the COVID ward now, and you have to go on to treatment right now. And he said, well, wait a minute. His wife was a nurse, so he makes a call to his wife. They know that I'm involved in helping people, and she says, we got a serious problem, Doc. They're telling him he's got to go in for COVID treatment, and he walked in under his own steam, and they're saying he's going to be on a ventilator. I said, the first thing you need to do is have him sign himself out and get him out of that hospital right now. And I'll give you all the reasons why, which I did. It took 2 hours. They paraded a whole handful of doctors in to berate him, to basically tell him how stupid he was, and that he'll probably die on his own, a dastardly death by leaving and not getting their treatment. Just like that. We got him extracted in 2 hours, which is amazing because the challenging ones are the ones we don't get that fast. He went through our treatment protocols and the things that we've got, and he was fine in a short amount of time because that's the way it rolls, right, for most people. But that's how quickly they begin to get their talons in you and begin to tell you from the very beginning you're going to get upon this pathway. And that pathway includes remdesivir and dexamethasone, and both of those begin to crash your system. They begin to crash your kidneys, which flood your lungs, which then leads you to the ventilator. that typically 80% of the time is a one-way path and you don't come back from that. And that's the hardest one for us to extract because the management of being on a ventilator is much, much higher to get somebody out of a hospital, and then they can't make the decision. So we try to get to them while they're conscious enough to say, I want out, right? If we get to them soon enough and can bring the resources to bear for them, then we have a much greater chance of saving them. But every week we lose people, they die. They get to us too late, or
they're dying because of the medication,
yes,
not because of the virus.
Here's an example. In the very beginning of COVID, in New York, where they had the big numbers, right? The doctors were coming out on the news saying, we've never seen a virus kill people like this before. Literally, day in and day out, we've never seen a virus kill people like this before. Well, guess what? It's the protocol that was given to you electronically by Fauci and friends, basically, for this treatment. And it's the treatment that failed the second trials, that killed more than 50% of the people, was taken out of the trial because of the death rate, put on the shelf. And guess what? They brought it back out, made this the only treatment, and demonized everything else. Okay? The world just didn't become a demon and didn't have an answer to this flu-like problem. Okay? But it's their protocols that have been doing this. And so when we get patients out of there, put them on other protocols that actually have efficacy all across the world, all across the U.S., they turn around and they do better. But it's the ones that we can't get to fast enough, soon enough, and they literally try to separate you from your family, from your friends, and gain full medical control. One of the things they look at when you go in the hospital is, are you an organ donor? Okay? The next thing they try to get you to sign is a do not resuscitate. Okay? I mean, it's all orchestrated from start to finish.
So listeners that are listening to this, they might say, I mean, and Bill, I've had people come to me, they want help because I can think of this one guy in Idaho, and he said he had his brother and then his father, they were both in the hospitals. He's trying to save them both. He's trying to both get them out of there. And it seems like once the individual is intubated, then it's like a death certificate. Is that right?
Yeah, two reasons why. One, we can't get the person to say they want out, because when they say that and they hold you against your will, that's kidnapping. So that's criminal. And that's where we can bring law enforcement in. So no one that I know has used law enforcement in the way that we're using it because I'm familiar with it, right? I mean, we literally do welfare checks at the hospital, if you can believe that, because they've separated families from family. And so we say, okay, well, let's do a welfare check. Let's get an officer over there. You're going to come in and say, I can't reach my family member. I want a welfare check. Well, they have a job
to do.
What is
that? What is that, welfare check? What does that mean?
Their job is to go and make contact with that person in the hospital and put that family member together and make sure that they're okay. As simple as that, right? Guess the other one.
That's something you can orchestrate as a police officer.
We do orchestrate it. The next one would be a civil standby. So now the hospital doesn't want to let you out, okay? So we bring the family member there, we maybe legal whatever we need to do, and as a civil standby, their job is to keep the peace. They're saying we're not going to let you out. Now the officer finds out that the person wants out, they're being held against their will. So the choices are, you let me go up there and make contact with that person, and they say, no, you can't because they're in the COVID ward. We say, yeah, I can because I'm here to do a civil standby and a welfare check, and this person wants out, which means that they say they're being held against their will. So you can either get out of my way or I can start arresting you as I go. Okay? I mean, it can go that straightforward. Now, not all agencies want to play. So that gets into the politics of law enforcement. But at the end of the day, it can be that simple. We try to make it get to them before we have to come to those kinds of remedies, right? I've even had judges' orders that the hospital has tried to deny. They have an order from a judge to release somebody. It's presented to them by law enforcement, and they're saying, no, we're not going to let him out. Like, excuse me? You're not going to let him out. And we actually, in that particular case, that person died. Yeah. And of course, the lawsuits ensue. But lawsuits don't bring people back. Okay? We can sue till the end of time, right? But at the end of the day, we want to save people, not go have lawsuits. And that's to the extent to which they think that they have the power to keep someone in a hospital against their will.
Where does this stem from? I mean, we can look at Fauci, we can look at the pharmaceutical companies. Where is this coming from? I mean, the fact that this is something that has, on a global scale, transpired.
So you need to go back and look at the CARES Act, okay? So the detail in the CARES Act gave them the emergency use authorization and what they believe are the powers to do these things.
Who's they?
Hospitals. Yeah, the hospital.
And pharmaceuticals are financing the hospitals, or?
Well, yeah. The government is financing the pharmaceutical company, and the government is financing the hospitals in this COVID pathway. So they're paying for the remdesivir. Okay, they're paying for the millions and hundreds of millions of RT-PCR tests, right? So the government's paying for this, and we're ultimately paying for it. So,
do you think that your efforts are bearing fruit? Can you tell listeners some of the victories along the way that from the steps of the Supreme Court to where you are right now, March of 2022? Is your effort working?
Well, the fruit that's bearing is the event that we're at today. You go from a ragtag group of doctors up there taking on the world, basically taking on the country, to these movements, to these events, to these other doctors that felt empowered to speak up and talk out, to the underground podcasts, if you will, not the legacy media, and the momentum that it's got, to tying into the truckers that are going to Washington, right? They all are connected in so many ways. I mean, in our world, in terms of getting people out of hospitals, every week we have a win. We write the medical exemptions for people. Every week that we get an amazing email from somebody who says, I finally escaped this jab because your medical exemption worked. That's a win for us, okay? So on every small level and every large level, we've seen this thing mushroom and grow. And it's not anything like it once was. And it's like once you have rung the bell, you can't unring it. Okay. Here you have rung the bell. Okay? We ring the bell. You're ringing the bell. We're all ringing the bell. Okay.
You are a personal bodyguard for a name that listeners recognize, and that's Sylvester Stallone. Are you familiar with the name Rocky Patel?
Rocky. Yeah.
Rocky Patel.
Yeah.
Patel.
Yeah.
You know who that is?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer. I'm just throwing this out there.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
In law enforcement.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He was a lawyer for the guy that you worked with.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you this, Bill, and I don't know where you're from, but you seem like you could be a cop. Okay, when I talk to you, right? I mean, you seem like you want your law straight, and you want things obeyed.
Right. Squared away, we call it.
Squared away, yeah. Squared there.
In the academy.
Okay.
Square yourself away.
So, what do you look at? You look at your country right here. You coast to coast from California, you go from California to New York, Florida, whatever it may be. Just lay it out. What's happening in your country?
I mean, I see a lot of confusion. I see people that had a belief system one way, and then now they have it another way. Even looking at my department, right? Our actual department was split right down the middle on this last election. But guess what? They've all come to one side now. So they were split right down the middle. Part of them were voting for Trump, and part of them were voting for Biden, for their own various reasons. But guess what's changed in just this short amount of time? They've all come along, and they're looking at this world a different way than they did before. So I see a big evolution in people.
All of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The whole department.
Oh, the ones that were on the holdouts now are the ones saying we're having the conversation now that we couldn't have before. Okay, that's to me how far it's come. Just to look inside my department. But before it was hard to have that conversation. It was almost you needed to stay away from it. Okay. And now we actually can openly have the conversations, and we can see, they go, yeah, I see what's really going on now, man. I would have never voted that way. I'd have known this was going to happen. So I see an awakening there. I mean, I see many, many more doctors that are willing to speak out than used to before, but also doctors are threatened all over the country still. And if you write 2 medical exemptions as a doctor, they're coming after your license. Okay? I mean, that's it. I work with a doctor right now. For writing 1 script of ivermectin, they put her in front of the state board and said, why are you writing this script, doctor?
What state is that?
Colorado. Yeah. And so she had to hire the attorney, go in front of the state board, bring in all the documentation, all the records, just to prove that ivermectin could be used off-label, right? safely, which is the bottom line. Okay, off-label safely for her patients. She's basically, I have doctors all over the country saying this works. I know it works. I use it with my patients. Why would I not want to let it work? Okay, why would I want them to get so bad that they have to end up in a hospital and run that gauntlet, right? So, I mean, I see a big evolution, and I see a lot of work that needs to be done, and that's why we're out here doing this. I mean, pushing.
So let's wind down with this, because that's really a prelude into where I wanted to go. Truckers Convoy, People's Convoy, surrounding DC Beltline. The Canadians set a precedence for that. Clay's been doing this since April. You've been doing this quite a while. We all keep pushing forward. It seems right now that these mandates are being relieved, right? It seems that way. They're starting to say, like DC, New York, it's like, okay, hey, it seems that way.
So I have a view on it, and my view is that it's actually so easy to see that it's almost like hiding in plain sight. Okay, they know that they're going to be, what do they call it, a bloodbath in the midterms? They know that it's going to be bad, right? And every step of the way, it's like playing chess. You telegraph your move so far in advance that it's almost laughable. It's so clear. This to me is so clear, the way they've done it. The way, all of a sudden in the news now, you don't see Fauci. You don't see, the NIH up there every day talking about masking your kids to the end of time. Now we know that that's the absolute worst thing you could ever do. Not only do they not work, but we know that they cause cognitive decline by 20% in children, right? So it's the absolute worst thing you can do. But so we see that completely backed off. Yeah, the war in Ukraine has taken over the news.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we had such a big problem going on here, well, how come where did it go?
Yeah.
Where did all that go? It didn't go anywhere, except that they know that they're not going to get bandwidth right now, and they know they need to back off and ease off from society, because we're not going to have cognitive issues remembering what happened before. We're all going to remember, and it's not going to be enough for them, I don't believe, to win the day. So, it's a very intentional move that they've made. It's palpable. Everybody feels it, sees it. But here's another thing about viruses. Can you stop the flu?
Doesn't seem to be.
You never can stop the flu, right? You could no more stop the flu than the theoretical mathematical model called SARS-CoV-2 that's identical to SARS-CoV-1 practically, than you could anything else, okay? And all of these mechanical means of human beings trying to do something that they think, I'm going to clean that surface, or I'm going to put on this mask, or that's going to make a difference to the flu. It doesn't, okay? It never could, never would, never will. It's all theater, as Rand Paul would say, theater, okay?
I like that. So, Americans, what do you exhort for Americans? A call to action. They continue to press away and get these vaccinations optional, right? I mean, look at California. There's legislation right now to get all these public school kids vaccinated, regardless of what vaccine, so that in 10 years, a bioweapon, let's say, could be used, or whatever it may be. Hey, let's get that injection in you. It's law.
So what needs to look at is your time frame. So in California, the governor was given $300 million by pharma, and that's why he mandated vaccines.
I know that.
So that's why those were in place, and that's why he's so bought in to that whole cabal. All right. So that's an important piece. What was the other piece you mentioned?
Well, what I was getting at was, what's the call to action? What do Americans kind of say? Okay, well, they're easing up on the mandates, or do they continue to try to wake up their neighbor? Is there an underlying issue going on in this country? What do you see truly happening? Has the country been invaded? Now, I'll interject this, Bill, because I know you got a lot of information, you got a lot going on in your mind. Let me interject this. Brigadier General Robert Spalding joined the program, wrote a book. I don't recall the name of the book, but I asked him this question. I says, Robert, I says, if the country has been invaded by an enemy, and it's a stealth enemy, so you can't see the enemy, what's the enemy, and who's the enemy?
Right.
So if we're looking at a country today that is clearly there's something afoul, there's clearly something afoul. How do you help define that, Bill, in your view? I mean, you're tackling it from a medical perspective. You're tackling it from a legal perspective. What is the stealth enemy? Is there a stealth enemy? What is it? How do...
It's actually not so stealthy when you're in deep as we are to see what it is. On the outside, looking in as the public, it may seem stealthy. But here's an example. So you got to go back to the roots, the core root or core cause of where this is coming from. So one of the ways to do that is look at the patents, okay? The patenting of SARS-CoV-2, before there was a known SARS-CoV-2. Look at the treatment for the patent that has a patent for the non-known SARS-CoV-2 before the launch of SARS-CoV-2. Dr. Martin does a great job of breaking this down, okay? I think David Martin. But at the end of the day, we know we have the patents. We know who they were working with, which is the DoD. We know when they went and got the patents. We know who was involved in the patenting of these products. Now we know, as we're breaking down we're breaking down the virus, we have certain pieces of the genome that match the patent, and there's a 1 trillion to 1 in 3 trillion chance that it was natural, which means it's 100% man-made. So we can put that argument to rest. Shall we finally do that? Okay, this didn't come from a bat, okay? It didn't come from a bat in the wild. It was made in the lab. We do know that. And then you come back to the patents, and when what you find now matches what's in the patent, how do you argue against that? So you come back to who's the bigger enemy here?
So we're talking about the money. We're talking about multi-billions of dollars caught up in pharmaceutical companies, caught up in research labs. If we follow the money, let me ask you this question. And you live in Arizona and also California. I had, Mark Fincham has been walking around.
And I work with Mark.
You work with Mark and Sonny Borelli.
Yeah.
I've asked both of them this question. And I've also asked this question to Anthony Sabatini, who's a Florida State rep. If we follow the money, we know that in the United States the money is hidden behind the facade of the Federal Reserve banking system. What is your thought on that? The Federal Reserve banking system. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't want to get too far away from my field.
Oh, okay, but we're following the money here. We're following the money. Don't worry about your field.
I'm not an expert in that area, but we follow the money that's being made, in this pandemic. That's what we're following, and the money trail is deep and it's wide, and it's why the hospitals put you in a pathway that can kill you. It's why so much money is being made on these vaccines that can kill you and maim you. The money trail is wide, and they've been setting up the tentacles for this for a long time to control it, own it, manage it. The FDA is a revolving door. The FDA is a revolving door. The NIH is a revolving door. They have people, so they're all working in consort with each other. And you look at the Fauci communications that are coming to light. It talks about what they knew and when they knew it, and that's going to find its way to lawsuits. What they knew and when they knew it, right? And what they were talking about, and then they tried to change the definition so that it wasn't gain of function. Guess what? At the end of the day, Rand Paul was right. It was gain of function. He was right when he called him a task. Again, follow the money.
Follow the money. All right, Bill. Thank you for joining the program, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Bill Lionberger, Guardians
of HumanityChildren.org.
And I want to give you the opportunity to give some final thoughts for listeners. What do you want listeners to walk away with?
The first thing is to try to help educate your close-in family and friends that will listen. Not everybody will listen, and not everybody is going to get it. But for those that do, you're going to save lives, and they know other people that they can educate and help save lives. And finally, Guardian's mission is all about protecting our genome and our children. If we keep them from this jab that pharma wants them to get, pharma wants that to be put on the schedule. If they can put it on the schedule, they can get immunity then for the vaccine to finally come out of emergency use. We can't allow them to put it on the schedule. We should not allow our kids to have access to this. It should never happen because it's way too dangerous. So you are the final line of defense to protect the kids, and you have to be the ones that stand up and protect them. So that's my final word.
Bill, pleasure.
Yeah.